At the back, on discount. This morning he gives us an update on Halifax Dartmouth hockey history. Thanks, David.
So prepare yourselves for a radical shift. Going back to the 1800s.
Nice.
And I thought it would be appropriate, since the meeting is being held here, to give you an update on research into, yes, the origins question. And I have a PowerPoint. We'll wait till that gets up and running. I'll stop and talk to the slides from time to time. My text is not very long, so you need not worry. We'll be at lunch soon enough. I'll begin by saying that the subject was passed on to me by Ben Hassan. Some of you may know he's a member of SIHR, and he sent me a message asking me if I wouldn't mind researching a subject for him, and that is when the first indoor hockey game was played in Nova Scotia. Getting close. Those are the books. Okay. Since we are meeting in Halifax, I thought I would take this opportunity to update SIHR on the state of some research I've been doing at the request of Ben Hassan. About a year ago, I received a request from Ben to access the microfilm versions of Halifax newspapers for the winter of 1862-63 to see if I couldn't verify a claim that hockey was played at the new indoor rink that was opened by the Horticultural Society of Halifax, as suggested by Martin Jones in his 2002 book, Hockey's Home, Halifax and Dartmouth. Got a copy here. Ben had taken on the job of verifying Jones's claim, which was based on the research of his grandfather, Dr. Martin Jones, as reported in an unpublished essay, The Birthplace of Hockey. As you probably know, I know from this group and its expertise, another book preceded Jones's on the importance of the Halifax area in the development of hockey in Canada. Garth Vaughan's The Puck Starts Here, The Origin of Canada's Great Winter Game, 1996. In fact, Jones was inspired to write his own version because he believed that Vaughan did not emphasize the greater importance of the Halifax-Dartmouth area over that of Windsor, Nova Scotia. That and the fact that Vaughan did not provide references for his research findings. Have the next slide, please. Now, in any case, I have gone through the 4 newspapers published in Halifax in the winter of 1862-63 and have found no reference to hockey being played at the Horticultural Rink, located in what is now known as the Public Gardens. So if you're new to Halifax, you've been walking around, you've probably gone by the Public Gardens. That was the location of this rink built in 62-63, which apparently is the first indoor skating rink in the British Empire. There are numerous references in these newspapers to the rink, its opening, a description of the building, mention of special events, but nothing about hockey being played there, at least not for the first year of operation. There were costume balls on skates and other special skating events, usually with musical accompaniment. There was a special dias for band players. These were organized by the Halifax Skating Club, which stopped signing up new members a few weeks after the rink opened. To skate at one of these events, one had to be a member of the skating club and the Horticultural Society, and the high fees ensured that only the affluent could afford to join. I still have the rest of the period, 1863 to 89, to go through. 89 is the year that the rink was demolished. A second indoor rink in Halifax opened in the fall. Next slide, please. Opened in the fall of 1880, and it stood on the corner of University or Morris Street and Tower Road. There's a basilica there now. This facility was open to the public, and admission was by a single event ticket. And we can actually see here just the roof of the rink in the public gardens. This picture is taken from the Citadel Hill, looking down to where the public gardens are. We can have the next slide, please. In his clear statement that no hockey was played on the horticultural rink, Vaughan cites the tension between the skaters who indulged in fancy skating. I thought my mother was the only person to use that term, fancy skating, instead of figure skating. It used to embarrass the heck out of me, but it turns out that in the 19th century, fancy skating is used, constantly, and figure skating is not really a term that's come into use yet. In any case, fancy skating essentially adapted traditional dances like the waltz to ice skating, and hockeyists, who were all about puck battles, team play, and games, was another group entirely opposed, really, to fancy skating culture. And the fancy skating culture, likewise, had no use for the hockeyists, as they were called. Vaughan, you can have the next slide, even claims that the Halifax Skating Club actually had a ban on hockey in its bylaws, which is something I have yet to verify. You go to the next slide. One can see from this map that there are a number of lakes near the Halifax Peninsula and Dartmouth, which means that there were natural ice surfaces on which members of the public could skate and play hockey if they so wished. So at the heart of this subject is the fact that hockey is somewhat unique as a sport with its outdoor-indoor dichotomy. The former evokes a free and natural informality, while the latter is associated with a more structured and artificial formality. While the book Putting a Roof on Winter, you have the next slide, was meant to refer to how hockey moved indoors early on in its development, the last 23 years has seen the popularity of the NHL hosting outdoor events in football stadiums. The next slide. Okay, the largest of these outdoor events was actually an NCAA game. Known as the Big Chill in the Big House, it featured the Michigan Wolverines versus their arch rival, the Michigan State Spartans. The picture of the game here. Certified attendance was 104,173 spectators. You can see from this photo that the sight lines for the majority of fans was less than ideal, to say the least. These events are more about enjoying the carnival spirit than watching the game. And of course, we had the latest version of this just last weekend in Edmonton. It raises the question, why, with the technology we have today, high definition TV, so many camera angles, why do people still pay money to go to see a live hockey game as we did last night? And the price of NHL tickets now, the last time I was at a Leaf game, it did cost me $300. I think I got away pretty easily. It was 2 tickets for $300 to watch 2 teams that weren't going to the playoffs. In any case, I do provide a bit of an answer to this question in the last chapter of my book, which you can get at a discount in the back of the room. So we can go to the next slide here. So what both Vaughan and Jones may be said to have established is the importance of the Halifax-Dartmouth area in the development of hockey as a Canadian game. both books devote a fair bit of attention on the local production of hockey sticks made by the Mi'kmaq, equipment adapted from other sports like cricket, and skates, the Star Manufacturing Company located in Dartmouth. As SIHR members, you will know that James Creighton is the father of hockey in Canada, and he was instrumental in bringing sticks and equipment from his home in Halifax to Montreal, where the first official Canadian hockey game was played in 1875, and from there to Ottawa, where Creighton played with the Red Rebels. Here you see him in the middle of the table. What I love about these old photographs is the relaxed nature of them. They're taken in lounges, there's carpets on the floor, they're sitting in comfortable chairs. We don't have anything like that today. I think what we go for today is the after you win the trophy picture on the ice. That's the team picture everyone really wants. So anyway, the task that Ben gave me required that I spend hours at the Nova Scotia archives reading the various Halifax newspapers from the late fall of 1862 to March 1863. As an academic at Dalhousie University for 34 years, I had some idea of what I was getting myself into. While the archives would likely have microfilm copies of these papers, it was unlikely that they were digitally searchable by keywords like hockey or hurley or rickets. This was in fact the case. Hence, I would have to read through the entire newspapers in search of any references, which can be mind-numbing work, I can tell you. The one benefit is that the exercise does give one a sense of daily life, which is to say local events, personal affairs, merchant operations, and political activity. One begins slowly, as it takes time or a while for one to familiarize oneself with the newspaper format of the time. There was no such thing as a sports section. Papers generally consisted of a folded sheet or 4 printed pages with rather small compact print and few visual designs or images. The front page usually was covered with ads. Page 2 consisted of a few articles on world events. The American Civil War dominating this section, of course, for this year, 62-63. Then tended to follow a section of short items of local interest, which is where one would likely find any references to recreational activity such as skating or games. And then a final page of more ads. And it's interesting how the ads just, fascinate you. Papers were published 2 or 3 times a week, and they contained several ads for clothing, special food items, general goods and services. Of particular interest to me were the numerous ads for skates, all manufactured in England or Europe. They were standing ads that appeared in generally the same place for several issues. This abundance speaks to the popularity of skating in the winter of 1863, of which the new horticultural rink was only part of the trend. Not only were there several lakes in the area, I think we're on to the next slide, but winter was cold enough then for the northwest arm to freeze over, something which I believe has only happened once since I have lived here, the last 35 years. I feel confident, next slide. I feel confident if an organized hockey game had been played in the area during this time, we would find reference to it in one of the local papers. There is a story about a game of cricket being played on the northwest arm in early January 1863. Team lineups, go to the next one, and a box score are provided, details that help establish the official nature of the match, similar to the SIHR guidelines in the early days of the origins of hockey debate. So there was a published box score and team lineups for that game in 1875 at the Victoria Rink in Montreal. can go to the next slide. Stay there. I'll close this update about the hockey ban at the horticultural rink in Halifax with a story about a couple of students of mine who were enrolled in my hockey literature class at Dalhousie about 10 years ago. They returned to campus all fired up to play some shinny, having just watched the latest World Juniors Championship. Getting off the airport bus next to the public gardens, they noticed that Griffin Pond, shown here in the picture, was a wonderfully smooth, frozen surface. And so they got their skates, jumped the fence, and started playing. Unfortunately, the police arrived and issued them tickets for trespassing, $500 each. Despite their sons' New Year's resolutions about more studying and better grades, Mom and Dad were not impressed. Times have changed, of course, but there remains that tension between the freedom of games like shinny and the public regulation of recreational activity. Thank you. Go to the next slide. This is just a picture of someone sitting at one of those microfilm machines. I'm sure some of you have experienced this. Your eyes just go cross-eyed at a certain point. The print is so small for newspapers of the 19th century that it's very hard to focus. You have to almost focus each image before you can, print off a JPEG of it. And you can't help but be, curious about the ads, and then you start noticing that ad for, the Simon's shop where they're selling the latest skates keeps appearing in that column on page 2. So you note that down, and you do get a sense of just how popular skating was. And it's clear that people were playing all kinds of games on ice surfaces, because just to skate around in a circle, as you can do here in Halifax on the oval, becomes rather boring. So very clear that Halifax and Dartmouth were instrumental in the development of the game. And when I teach this class, many of my students from King's College don't even know that James Creighton was a King's student, and they're so impressed by this. The father of hockey is actually one of our alumni. I hope you are updated now on the identification of at least the first indoor game, which according to Ben doesn't seem to have occurred until 1883 in the other rink, which was the exhibition rink. Well, thank you very much.
David ended with the gun, but we have time, of course, for some questions.